get into this one quickly. South African Revenue Services on Wednesday suspended its IT executive, Mmamathe Mokhuane, on allegations of misconduct. Mokhuane is the fifth executive to be suspended in recent weeks. Those suspended were Hlengani Mathebula, the Chief Officer of Governance, Strategy and Communications, Lebelo, who is Employee Relations in the organization, Tebogo Mokwena is the HR Chief Officer, and Refilwe Mokwena at Legal. The organization says these suspensions are part of Commissioner Edward Kieswetter ongoing review of governance and leadership at SARS. In studio with us, we of course have got Khaya Sithole to talk to us about this. Good to see you, Khaya. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you.
So the latest to get suspended now, as we know, is Mokhuane, who was here in studio after that interview where it was that famous line, please, to Sakina, protect me from yourself.
Protect me from yourself, yeah, I remember.
I mean, so this cleanup that's happening at SARS, what do you make of it?
Look, I think what you will see is that the people that have been suspended are essentially what you might call the Moyane Brains Trust. These are the people that were very close to the former commissioner, and of course, if the former commissioner is going to be accused of having dismantled SARS, you have to then ask who were his foot soldiers, and I think these are the individuals who probably are regarded as the foot soldiers of whatever Moyane was getting up to at SARS in particular. And I think what you're seeing here, of course, is that now they're undertaking a process of going back to ask firstly the question of how these people were onboarded into those positions and how they performed since then. Now, if we remember the former head of IT when she was here, and also when she was at the Nugent inquiry, she gave an impression that the systems were very dysfunctional. I think in one of her responses, she said there's only been one strategy meeting relating to IT, and of course, IT is at the heart of what SARS ought to do, and to get an answer like that from the person in charge of the IT systems would have created the impression, at least to the incoming commissioner, that there are definitely questions to be asked. Now, the interesting thing about it is that they call these precautionary suspensions, and then they say, no wrongdoing has been found. Again, that's just PR speak. If you're going to go out and say you're suspending a person, there has to be some strong allegations that you found, and you're simply just going through the motions of saying, now we're going to undertake a lengthy disciplinary process, and at the end of it, this will be the outcome. But I don't see that any of these five are going to come back, at least not in the same positions they were in under the previous SARS administration.
Well, I mean, if we look back to the issues, it's really emanating from the Nugent Commission, and a lot of these things that are being put into place coming under the leadership of Kieswetter, implementing the recommendations. This has been vetoed by the president as well. So this is something that they're taking very, very seriously. What is the summation of the commission?
Look, I think the commission took the view that SARS had essentially been systematically dismembered from inside. The one particular thing was perhaps the large business center. There were a lot of conversations around that because it was one of the engine rooms that was driving the revenue collection systems at SARS. When Bain and Mr. Moyane came in, they unilaterally changed some of the processes. They displaced particular people, and a lot of people simply felt in limbo. So I think if you look at the Nugent Commission in totality, it simply said there's definitely a need to restructure and to relook at what SARS is doing. And I think in the new commissioner, you probably have someone who has the energy to say, look, I'm going to implement this turnaround strategy. And also the very important thing about it is that, remember, after commissions of inquiry, there's always this sense of lethargy where people think that a new person is going to come in and then nothing happens. The NPA is one good example of this, where for months we've been waiting for just one person to be dragged into the yellow overalls, into the orange overalls, but nothing has happened. And I think at SARS, obviously, them being able to communicate that this is what we're doing, this is the cleanup that's going on, it helps them with the public trying to regain the trust, because I think that's one of the big things that Nugent mentioned, that, you know, people have actually lost faith in this particular revenue collection agency simply because of the way it's conducted itself. So I do think that Kieswetter has done the right thing by articulating and communicating to the public what it is that he's doing, and he's done so in such a very short space of time.
Well, he certainly has, but I mean, let's look to some of these suspensions as well. I mean, if you look at there were internal issues among even the staff members that ended up in the media. So you've got Hlengani Mathebula, who heads up communications, was reported by a staff member to HR. Lebelo, who called in a legal firm to investigate Mathebula, and they're both on suspension. I mean, are these standalone issues, or are we seeing a thread happening?
I think there is definitely a thread. They are all interrelated. Remember, there was one particular invoice for somebody to read a book to check whether it said anything bad about Mr. Moyane. And I think the reality, of course, is that this was the team that really was the center of what Moyane's agenda was, whatever Moyane's agenda was. And I think for them to obviously then be hauled into disciplinary processes, they are being called to account for their own individual actions. And I think the problem always comes that when you then say, well, my boss instructed me to do so, and then people say, but did you think that was the right thing to do for the institution? Never mind what your boss said. And that's where we tend to find these particular disputes. But I do think that what we're going to see here is that perhaps there's going to be a renewed leadership cohort at SARS that is going to be probably made up of people who do not form part of what you call the Moyane Brains Trust. And we're hoping that that's going to be obviously the momentum, the impetus that SARS needs in order to start moving forward.
Are you happy with Kieswetter so far and what he's doing?
Nobody who pays taxes will ever be happy with a tax man. Because,
well, that goes without saying. But let's get down to their mandate. I mean, are they actually, he's cleaning up from what we're understanding, and they're going back to what they should be doing, or are they?
Look, I mean, I've interviewed him personally a couple of weeks ago, and my impressions of him is that he's simply just doing the basics right. He hasn't come up with this new grand strategy of completely turning things around. He's simply saying, let me rebuild the foundations of the institution, and once we rebuild the foundations of the institution, then we can see how we elevate it going forward. So based on my assessment of what I've seen in the media and my own personal interactions with him, I think he's sort of on the right path for now.
Well, that's good. I know that we're heading close to the news time, but just one question to quickly ask you. Yes, we talk about the intention to clean up and trying to come in with a lot of integrity, but let's not forget, I mean, there were certain concerns regarding his own appointment.
Yeah, and I think the key issues relating to his own appointment was how really the process was run. So, of course, the economic freedom fighters were particularly unhappy about the process. They even manufactured a particular family relationship between the head of the selection panel, Mr. Trevor Mano, and Mr. Kieswetter himself. And I think the interesting thing about it is that a lot of people compared it to the NPA process, which was fully transparent. Everything was visible to the public, while in the SARS process, not everything was that visible. Now, of course, in the SARS process, there's going to be particular questions, there's going to be particular issues that are put to the candidates that you probably don't want to be universally known by the general public. So, for example, if they say to you, who do you think we should pursue as a tax dodger of some case or that nature, then a candidate would say, look, from what I've seen, from what I've heard, I think we should look in that particular direction. You probably don't want those people that you're planning on pursuing to then know that you mentioned that in particular you're going to pursue them when you get into office. So I do think that we had to get the right balance between saying, should this be a completely transparent and a completely open process, or was the sort of secrecy under which they operated warranted?
All right, let's leave it there for this morning. Khaya, thank you. Always great speaking to you and getting your analysis on certain issues. Political analyst Khaya Sithole discussing the recent suspensions of some of the senior officials at SARS, and of course, more importantly, bringing back that integrity to SARS, and whether or not our new SARS boss is actually doing that. So we'll see how things go in time. And of course, end of August is always that worst time, because you've got to start paying the money back to SARS.
Yes.
But let's see if revenue collection goes up, then
with a dying economy, that's going to be a struggle, but we'll try.
We'll try. All right. Thanks very much, Khaya. Always good chatting. Let's get you the news at 8 now.